It's time, everybody. Welcome to the October 23rd. I can remember this day, Bill, 'cause today's my anniversary, but 32 years, yay. And so welcome to the October 23rd meeting of the Irving Las Colinas Rotary Club. Mr. LeVar, Dr. LeVar, if you would please come help lead us in prayer. Everyone can stand.
Yes, change. This is the kind of day that if I were governor, I would declare a state holiday. Let everybody just go home and be outside, because it's after the heat of the last few weeks, this is glorious. Would you join me in a spirit of prayer? Eternal God, we give you thanks for the blessings of this day, for this club, its work in our community. We ask your spirit to be upon us, to bless what it is that we do, our efforts at service above self, to bless this food, to take it to the nourishment of our bodies, and to keep us this day in your peace. In the name of Christ, amen.
Thank you, sir. I know a long-term thing, but we'll talk about it. Okay. Richard is going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
A place you can go your heart. I pledge allegiance to the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You may be seated. Donna is going to come introduce our guests.
Good afternoon on this lovely day. Our guest today is Mo Jan. She's visiting. Welcome.
And I want to give a shout out to Rick and Patty and Kathy. Thank you for working the Rotary table last night. We ran the chamber event at Toyota of Irving. It's a really great turnout. There were a lot of people there. A lot of people visited the table. We've got several that are interested in coming to a meeting. One guy's going to come next week who said he was so excited when he saw our sign. He said, I knew Rotary when I was little in India. My father and grandfather were in it. So he couldn't come today, but he's going to come next week. So we're excited for him to be a part. He said he wants to be a part of it. So, also remember the bucket is going to the choir. So being able to pay for the Irving ISD students to come sing for us for Christmas, it'll pay for the bus and the meals for the choir. So that's what the bucket's going to be going to. And I apologize today. I'm going to have to leave a little bit early. I hate I'm going to miss part of David's presentation, but I do have a flex cap. So Rick is going to close out the meeting for me today. Jeff, would you mind sharing with us about the Blues Festival last weekend?
Yes, good afternoon, Rotarians. We had a great barbecue and blues festival last week. Rick Lindsay was the MC. It went amazing. Thank you very much. Behind the stage were all of the tables that you could get. I was able to acquire one for Rotary. We had a nice presence at the table. We had Rotary signs, flags, and my foundation. Rick Lindsay as MC would announce, thank you so-and-so, thank you so-and-so, Rotary this. So thank you for all the little 5-second blurbs and everything. Stacy Bennett Pickens from the Morning Rotary came to assist. They are very eager to start talking about the clubs, however it looks coming together, but we had a great barbecue and blues festival and we're able to pass out a lot of information about Rotary.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for doing that.
Yes.
Like I've mentioned before, I think raising awareness about us, what we do, what we're about is the key to helping this club to grow. So thank you for doing that, Jeff.
Yes.
All right. Terry, would you like to well, I know hopefully everybody read David's bio. So, David Lee is the Director of Education and Programming for the Dallas Historical Society. So I'm super excited to hear him talk today. History is one of those things I just memorized when I was in school for the test, and I really don't know a lot about it, and I would love to learn more about it now that I'm older. So I'm excited to hear some of this. And David's going to be discussing the Battle of the Alamo and the Texas Liberty Forever exhibit that is currently at the Hall of State in Fair Park, as well as information about the Dallas Historical Society and what they do. So please welcome David Lee.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for the opportunity to come out and to share a little bit of history with you today. Sorry. And I have a few slides. It's not a long, a lengthy slide presentation, but a few images that should help illustrate some of what I'm talking about today. So I am the Director of Education and Programming. A little bit about me is that I am a native Texan. I was born and raised in North Texas, and for many years I was a classroom teacher in Dallas ISD. Also, I worked at the district leadership level in the test development department. And about 3 years ago, I came on board to the Dallas Historical Society to serve as the Director of Education and Programming.
Hey, David, while we're waiting for those slides to come out,
Yes, sir.
history's such a fascinating topic, so especially somebody like yourself who got into it at such a young stage. So what sparked your interest in history that led to where you are today?
Well, that's a wonderful question. I was about 5 years old, and my mom took me on a trip to Atlanta, Georgia. And we visited the cyclorama and the Atlanta battlefield. And around the same time, a family friend gave me a book, the How and Why picture book of the Civil War. And something just captured my imagination. And I read as much as I possibly could. And, you know, I remember later my grandmother telling me, your grandfather just didn't know. It's like, what is this guy going to do? He's a great student, but what practical skills does he have? And so I became a teacher and an educator and tried to instill that same passion with my students and do the same day today through the museum.
Thank you.
So I'll go ahead and begin, and at some point I should have some slides. I am going to speak from notes. My wife can tell you that if I speak extemporaneously, sometimes I can wander a little bit. I'm sure no one else has that issue, and I think I have about 25 minutes. So in the pre-dawn darkness of March 6, 1836, a weary Texian sentry standing guard outside the crumbling walls of a Spanish mission known as the Alamo in San Antonio de Bejar watched restlessly under silvery moonlight. Unknown to him and the other handful of pickets, approximately 1,100 Mexican soldiers impatiently awaited orders to advance. The siege that started on February 23rd with the arrival of Santa Anna's army was about to reach its final bloody conclusion. Well, why would a handful of Anglo colonists and Tejanos fortify and defend an old Spanish mission against such overwhelming odds? How did the battle unfold? What was the significance of their sacrifice? And why has it captured the hearts and imaginations of so many over the last 200 years that have passed since that fateful day in 1836, almost 200 years? These are just a few of the questions surrounding the siege and battle of the Alamo. For the next few minutes, I'll provide an overview of one of the most important events in Texas history and place it within the broader framework of the Texas Revolution. I'll also discuss the magnificent Texas Liberty Forever exhibit featuring the diorama at the Hall of State. And one thing before I begin, I'd like to point out is that it's important to remember that countless books, articles, videos, and films have been produced on this topic. And even minor details are fiercely debated by both experts and amateurs. Still, in the short time we have, I'll do my best to provide an accurate and concise summary. San Antonio de Bahar was the largest and most influential settlement in Texas at the time. Founded as a mission and presidio in 1718, it became the capital of Spanish and Mexican Tejas and served as an essential communications and logistics connection to the settlements further east. When conflict erupted in 1835 over Santa Anna's consolidation of power and revocation of the liberal reforms enshrined in the Constitution of 1824, it was inevitable that it would reach San Antonio. Following the battles of Gonzales and Goliad, Santa Anna ordered his brother-in-law, General Martin Perfecto de Cos, to lead a force of almost 700 soldiers to Behar. Cos elected to fortify the settlement rather than face the Texians in the field. In October, a Texian force led by Stephen F. Austin and Edward Burleson besieged the city, which culminated in a bloody street-by-street and house-to-house assault between December 5th and December 10th. With the surrender of General Cos and his retreat southward, no Mexican forces remained in Texas. I'm going to pause just for a second. I do have a USB drive if we need a backup of my presentation. There's a map and a couple of images.
Sorry about that. Oh, no worries. Sorry.
As a former classroom teacher, I am familiar with technical glitches. I would have the best digital lesson with video clips and interactive, engaging activities, and then the internet would go up that morning. So it's always good to have a backup. There should be a PowerPoint on the USB that just says add the Alamo. Yes, thank you. We should have that in just a moment. In late December, the Mexican Army of Operations, led by General Santa Anna, began marching north, bent on reclaiming Behar and crushing the land pirates, as Santa Anna called the illegal Anglo immigrants. Some of his soldiers were seasoned veterans, but most were inexperienced recruits. Some of them didn't even speak Spanish. This is a little known fact about the Mexican army. Many of them were Native Americans from the Yucatan Peninsula and did not speak Spanish as their native language. Supplies were limited. Each battalion only carried about a month's worth of rations, and water was scarce along the route. Making things even worse, sickness spread among the soldiers, along with the women and children that were following the army. Santa Anna had made provisions for a medical corps, but there was no field hospital and very few doctors. So this would have been a very difficult march, and many of the soldiers did not want to be there. They were essentially forced into Texas at bayonet point. The map, you can kind of see a little bit some of the major movements of the troops there. I know it's a little bit small, and then we have the Alamo compound there. Meanwhile, the Texian forces in Behar slowly melted away, thanks to a combination of confusion, incompetence, and the ambitions of Texas leaders. Dr. James Grant and Frank Johnson called for volunteers for an ill-fated expedition to Matamoros. Lured by visions of glory, many of the Texians joined them. Even worse, before they left, they stripped the town of supplies. Other Texians simply went home to their families. They had responsibilities, families and children to care for. So ultimately, Colonel J.C. Neal was left with only about 100 men in San Antonio. At the same time, the embryonic Texas government was divided. Governor Henry Smith threatened to dissolve the Provisional Council. And when the council heard that he was threatening to dissolve them, they said, "You can't dissolve us, we'll just impeach you." So government gridlock, right? We think this is something new, but it's been going along for a long time. Neal wrote letters to both sides, but neither was willing or able to help or provide guidance. He realized, though, that he had far too few men to defend San Antonio, and he had no means to transport the cannons that were there. And so he concentrated his men in the Alamo and started to work to improve the defenses. He did not want to give up those cannons. I've read that the Alamo was the most heavily fortified position in North America at that time, west of the Mississippi River. There were somewhere to about 18 to 20 cannons, just a variety of different types of weapons. On January 19th, 1836, Jim Bowie arrived with a company of volunteers and orders from General Houston to, quote, blow up the Alamo and abandon the place. However, impressed with Neal's improvements, Bowie agreed that the Alamo and the cannon were too valuable to abandon. Again, they did not want to give up those cannon. On February 2nd, he wrote to Governor Smith, informing him that he and Neal would, quote, die in these ditches before surrendering. Lieutenant Colonel William Barrett Travis arrived with a company of reinforcements on February 3rd, and 5 days later, David Crockett with his Tennesseans came in, prompting a celebration that included a speech by the famous frontiersman and former U.S. Congressman. Leadership was left to Travis when Neal was forced to depart. He learned that his family was ill, he had a sick relative, and so he returned home. And this did not sit well with many of the men who preferred Bowie as their leader. As a result, they had an election on February 12th, and unsurprisingly, Bowie was elected to command. He celebrated in a way that only Jim Bowie could. He went into town and got rip-roaring drunk, misbehaved across the city, let all the prisoners out of the jail, harassed citizens, and the next day, maybe perhaps feeling, a little sorrowful or a little regretful, agreed to share command, that he would lead the volunteers while Travis took command of the regulars. Meanwhile, Santa Anna and the Mexican Army were on the march. Juan Seguin's Tejano scouts tried to warn the Texan leaders, but they didn't take his warning seriously. They doubted that the Mexican Army could reach Bejar before mid-March. On February 20th, though, they started noticing something interesting happening in the town, that almost all of the civilians packed their belongings and began heading out. When Travis ordered a lookout to ascend the tower of the San Fernando Church Cathedral, he almost immediately reported that he could see the glint of Mexican bayonets on the horizon. The Texians gathered what supplies they could and retreated into the confines of the Alamo. Now, the Alamo had many shortcomings and limitations. In fact, it wasn't much of a fortress at all. It had no extending bastions or gun embrasures. Those are the openings in the walls to fire cannons. In some places, the adobe walls were only 6 feet tall, so not much taller than an average man. And they didn't have loopholes or parapets, smaller openings to shoot out from. Part of the defenses extending in front of the chapel, you can see if my laser pointer works here. Whoops, I went forward. Well, that works. Was simply a wooden picket fence, essentially, with sharpened stakes at the top. That's where Colonel Crockett and his Tennesseans would have been stationed. So it had a lot of shortcomings. But Lieutenant Neal had not been idle. With the assistance of Chief Engineer Green Jameson, he had mounted approximately 20 cannons of various calibers. He constructed an abatis of felled trees and cut down trees and sharpened the branches. A protected gun emplacement called a lunette in front of the main gate, and dug trenches in several points. Another thing that they did was in the rooms facing the plaza, they put stakes in the ground and stretched cattle hide, two cattle hides, and then stuffed dirt in between so that you couldn't shoot directly into the rooms. Despite all of these improvements, the main obstacle to defending the Alamo was the size of the compound. If you go down and visit the Alamo today, you'll only see a very small portion of it. But even with reduced crews on the cannons, there was only about one defender for every 10 feet of wall. That's a lot of space to try to cover with one person. After raising the blood red flag of no surrender or no quarter and being answered with a cannon shot, the Mexican Army positioned its 10 light cannons and opened a constant bombardment. The Mexican soldiers quickly learned to be wary of approaching too close, as the long rifles of the Texians could reach out to about 200 yards, while their muskets could only fire accurately to about 50 or 75 yards. Earthworks protected the Mexican guns, and as the siege went on, they inched closer and closer to the walls. On February 24th, Travis dispatched his famous letter, quote, to the people of Texas and all Americans in the world, reporting no casualties, despite being under heavy bombardment for 24 hours. Initially, the Texians answered the Mexicans shot for shot, but Travis quickly realized that ammunition was going to be an issue. And on the fourth day of the siege, they started holding their fire to try to save their ammunition. On February the 29th, the only reinforcements to reach the Alamo arrived when 33 volunteers from Gonzales quietly entered the fortress around 3 in the morning. They made their way through the Mexican army. And on the next day, March 1st, the men celebrated with Crockett playing the fiddle and Scotsman John McGregor accompanying him on the bagpipes. I've often wondered to myself, what would that concert have sounded like? I can't really imagine bagpipes and fiddle together. They did the best they could with what they had. Travis allowed some of the scarce powder and shot to be used for 2 cannon blasts. One of them, which interestingly crashed through the roof of the house that Santa Anna was using for his headquarters, right to, as I remember, the dining room table, but Santa Anna was not there at that time. So one of those great, what if moments in history. On March 2nd, the mind-numbing routine of the siege resumed. The defenders grew weary. There were too few men to rotate sentries, so they slept at their posts. On March 3rd, Travis sent a letter to the Independence Convention again, requesting reinforcements, but Courier James Bonham arrived with news that Fannin was not coming. And by March 4th, a Mexican battery, quote, within musket shot, collapsed a portion of the north wall. And Jameson directed work parties throughout the night to shore up that damage, to fix it up as best they could. Santa Anna convened a meeting of his generals on the night of March the 5th, and it quickly became apparent that the conference was a mere formality. The general had made up his mind. The Alamo would be taken by assault at dawn the following day, and the honor of Mexico would be redeemed with blood. Several of his officers present at this meeting begged him to wait for the arrival of the heavy cannon. They were still on their way from Mexico. If we got those heavy cannons, they said, we can collapse the walls. The Texians will have no choice but to surrender. We can end the siege with a limited loss of life. But Santa Anna was determined at whatever cost, he would have his moment of glory and he would punish the Texian defenders. On the same day, Travis assembled the defenders together. This is a place where surviving accounts differ a bit, but it was clear that he let them know there would be no reinforcements. One of the myths of the Alamo is that from the beginning, this was an act of sacrifice and that they knew that they would be surrounded, there would be no relief. Until almost the very end, they were expecting reinforcements. At least 2 sources suggest that a majority of the defenders were at least willing to consider negotiating a surrender, which might have been another reason that Santa Anna wanted to go ahead and assault the wall. Travis makes a speech, according to some of the sources, may or may not have given the men an opportunity to leave if they wanted to. One account says that one man did. It's very difficult to say precisely exactly what happened, but it is important to remember that they were there willingly and they chose to be there. By 5 a.m. on March the 6th, 4 columns of Mexican soldiers lay on the chilly earth surrounding the Alamo, awaiting orders to advance. The men grew restless, and at 5:30 a.m., Santa Anna issued the attack orders. Another thing to remember about the battle is that it took place in the pre-dawn darkness. Adding to the horror of the scene would have been the fact that you couldn't see very far. As you can see on the map, there are 4 main columns attacking different areas of the Alamo compound that were identified to be the weakest. Here on the left is the north wall, where the wall was really crumbling. You can see kind of right in here. It was supposed to be a surprise attack, but one of the Mexican soldiers spoiled it by yelling out, "Viva Santa Anna," and then he's immediately answered by other soldiers calling out, "Viva Santa Anna, Viva la República," awakening the sleeping garrison. Accompanied by his enslaved servant Joe, Travis rushes out to the battery on the north wall, which is right here from the barracks, and almost immediately is among the first defenders to fall, shot by a Mexican soldier in the forehead. The Texian cannons took a terrible toll on the approaching columns, creating gaps in the Mexican formations. But ironically, as they got closer to the walls, they were safer because the guns could not elevate downward. So in front of the walls became this teeming mass of confusion, wounded soldiers, officers trying to organize them and keep them moving forward. Urged on by those officers, eventually sheer mass overwhelmed the defenders on the north wall. General Juan Amador led his men over the wall, located the gate, and swung it open from the inside to allow more attackers into the plaza. The Texians fell back into the rooms lining the plaza and chapel as the waves of attackers swept into the fortress. So you can see on this map, and those rooms had been barricaded along the wall with the cattle hides packed with dirt to protect the doorways. Facing desperate defense from within those rooms, the Mexican soldiers turned the Texian cannons against them. Because this happened relatively quickly, the Texians were not able to spike the cannons. In those days, what you do if you knew your cannon was about to be captured, you take a metal file and stick it down to the touch hole where you would like the fuse for the cannon and snap it off, break the metal so that it couldn't be fired against you. But the Mexican army, and facing this defense in room to room, took those cannons and then blasted their way room to room throughout the compound. Some Texians attempted to surrender, but no quarter was given. The chapel was the last to fall. That's also where the women and children were gathered. Lost my point for a minute, place for a minute. But as dawn rose over the Alamo, it would have revealed a hellish landscape of broken bodies, bearing mute testimony to the savagery of the battle. This would have been, it's almost incomprehensible. The efforts to try to film it and capture it, I don't think have been able to do justice to just how nightmarish this scene would have been. As many as 600 Mexican soldiers were killed, and of the somewhere around 180 defenders, all of them perished. And what did this accomplish? Despite numerous claims to the contrary, this is one of the myths of the Alamo, Sam Houston did not use the time provided by the Alamo to organize and train the army. Instead, he was at the Independence Convention. But what the Alamo did is it convinced the Texians that we have to have complete independence. Up until the Alamo, the convention was split. There were those that wanted to restore the Constitution of 1824 and get their rights under Mexican law, under the government, and there were those that wanted independence. After the Alamo, this was a point where there was no turning back. The Texians were united. When the Mexican army moved east, they would face a newly united group of Texians. To this day, again, many of the details of the siege and battle are debated, and there are fierce arguments about even some of the minor things. But what's important about this battle, more than the military side or the tactics, is its symbolic significance, what it means to the heart of Texans then and today. To this day, the word Alamo brings emotions to mind. It brings debate to mind. So what does that have to do with the Dallas Historical Society? And why am I up here talking to you about the Alamo? Well, when I was brought on board 3 years ago, I started reading and researching our founder, George Bannerman Dealey. And I found that in 1909, Mr. Dealey, publisher of the Dallas Morning News, later owner of the Dallas Morning News, sent a letter to the park board explaining his decision to pay for a half-size Alamo Chapel replica at the state fairgrounds. And he paid for this out of his own pocket. He said, the great mass of people in North Texas never have the opportunity to see the Alamo, but they can see and study this exact replica of the original and thus be created or augmented in the minds of the younger generation, a patriotic feeling and pride for the noble band which fought and died for the freedom which we now enjoy. When I read that passage, I ran down the hall to our director, Mr. Carl Chow, and said, look, we're doing the same thing Mr. Dealey wanted to do back in 1909. We're fulfilling that vision of helping people understand the Alamo. And so we have a massive exhibit created by a gentleman named Mr. Tom Feely. It's a permanent exhibition at the Hall of State in Fair Park. Mr. Feely created this diorama over the course of 20 years, and it provides a snapshot of the final assault on the Alamo. He worked with Alamo researchers. He rebuilt portions of the diorama as new details emerged. It's so impressive. I encourage you to come see it. It's over 330 square feet, 2,000 hand-painted figures, and it gives you a scene of the battle that it's very difficult for you to get anywhere else. Bringing the exhibit to Dallas for us was quite challenging. It had to be separated into 4 parts, loaded into custom-made racks on a large truck, and brought down from Pennsylvania, where Mr. Feely lives. Fortunately, it was not damaged in the flooding of February 2021. Because of the freeze, we had some internal pipes burst and the Hall of State was severely damaged. But it did not damage the diorama. And we have also created a digital app which tells the story of the battle in both Spanish and in English with animations of the key figures. And it's a great teaching tool for students and for visitors that just want to learn more and understand the Alamo battle. A little bit about the Dallas Historical Society. I think I'm just about at the end of my time. Here are some images. It takes the entire South Texas room. We opted not to fully enclose it in glass because it would mar the experience in terms of being able to take photographs. And also the app works better because with the app, you can actually place yourself inside the diorama and do a 360 view as if you were there. Here's a few close-up images. This is the lunette at the front gate. And then over on the right, the abatis where Colonel Travis would have been, Crockett would have been. You can see some kind of close-up details of the fighting. I know I'm a little short on time, I think, but one of the interesting facts of the Alamo battle was this woman right here. There was a African-American woman whose body was found in this position with a weapon beside her. And for many years, it was a great mystery of the Alamo. Well, a few years back, a researcher in Louisiana found an advertisement for a runaway enslaved woman named Sarah. And the advertisement said that she may have been in the company of a man named Patrick Henry Herndon. And the researcher said, wait a minute, I've heard that name before. Where have I heard that name? Patrick Henry Herndon was an Alamo defender confirmed to have died at the Alamo. So we cannot say with 100% accuracy, but one of the most interesting mysteries of the Alamo is how did this woman get there? Was she Sarah? Was she in love with Patrick Henry Herndon? Were they trying to get to Mexico to get to freedom and found themselves at the Alamo? How did this happen? We can't say for sure, but it sure is an interesting story to think about. There are many stories like that from the Alamo. It's another scene you can kind of get the scale of the famous pecan tree that all the accounts talk about at the Alamo. Close-up details of the figures that Mr. Feely painted. I can't imagine 20 years on one project. So again, I'm with the Dallas Historical Society. Our mission, we've been around since 1922, is to collect, preserve, and present the history of Dallas and the North Texas region. There's our founder, George Bannerman Dealey. I love this quote from our organizing meeting. Mr. John Wynn Barton said, "The nation that is not proud of its history is not worthy of the name of nation, and the city that's not proud of its history is not worthy of the name of city." Our home is the Hall of State, built in 1936 for the Texas Centennial, one of the treasures of Art Deco architecture. The complex of buildings at Fair Park is visited by people from around the world to appreciate the art and history and architecture. Today, we have about 3 million historical artifacts. We work as a research institution, as well as a museum and an educational organization. Most recently, we've received grant funding from HEB to provide reimbursement for transportation for field trips and lunches for school children that want to come out and visit our museum and learn about Texas history. So if you know any educators, please direct them to our website, dallashistory.org. There's some more photos of our facilities. This is our director, Mr. Chow. And my contact information is david@dallashistory.org, dallashistory.org. And love to reach out to school groups, also Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, church groups, any youth group type organization that has students. We would be happy to use those grant funds to help cover the transportation costs and provide meals. I think I'm about out of time. If there are any questions, though, I'll be happy to stick around or However, it's about 12 till. Thank you so much. I know that was a whirlwind explanation of the battle, but I appreciate the opportunity to be here and share some history with you. Also on the tables, there is a copy of our most recent historical journal. And if anyone's interested in more information or membership, there's info there too. If you believe in preserving history, we appreciate all of those that help support us. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I couldn't decide if I was watching John Wayne as you were talking. One of the other famous movies about that. I know this group's got some questions. So who has a good question out there? This is a great topic. Brian, come on. Yeah, Patty.
Okay, maybe I just didn't get it, but so was that Mr. Feely contracted by the Dallas Historical Society?
No, Mr. Feely made this diorama as a true labor of love. As a younger man, he was inspired, as many of his generation were, with the Fess Parker television show and then later the John Wayne movie. He built a smaller version of the diorama that was for many years in the Alamo gift shop / chapel area. You may have seen if you went down there years ago. And then he built the larger one. When he was trying to determine where to donate or what to do with the diorama. At that time, the Alamo, it was before all the new work has been done down there. They didn't have space for it. They weren't interested in accepting it. And so our museum found out about it and we jumped on the chance to have it here in Dallas in North Texas. It's just like Mr. Dealey said back in 1909, it's a great way to teach the history for the students who may not be able to get down to the Alamo. But he did it just as a hobby. His daughter helped him. I understand he started in his garage and then ran out of space. And so he built a separate building on his property. He's kind of in, if I understand, northwestern Pennsylvania. And apparently the winters they get snowed in and that's what he would do. He'd go out and work on his diorama and tinker with it till he got it the way that he wanted it. So we're honored to have it. But it's a neat story how he came to do that. A testament to his interest and his dedication.
Hold on. Yes, yeah. Bill.
Did you realize, and I'm good, being prompted, the president of the United States at this point was Martin Van Buren, and right there sits one of his descendants.
Well, you know, and it's interesting because there's a lot of information that's come forth and a lot of speculation about why did the Texas Revolution occur? What were the motivations? And I think any serious scholar or amateur scholar is the motivations were all over the place. It was an international group of defenders, as well as the Tejanos. There were people from Ireland, people from England, people from Scotland, from France. There were abolitionists. There were people from the Deep South that were wealthy slave owners. It's really hard to say it was exactly this. There were different motivations for people to be there. But I think a significant number of the Texans, and especially as the revolution started to pick up speed, many of them thought, oh, this is a done deal. We're going to win this thing. And immediately we're going to be annexed. Of course, the story works out differently. And we have those years as a republic. But I think there are a lot of people who are like, yeah, President Van Buren, he'll get us in.
Do you have follow-on exhibits that talk about the battle of San Jacinto?
We
might separate the two.
We do have, in fact, what we normally do, and our museum exhibits do change, but in our we have 4 regional rooms and in the Great Hall, which are our main exhibit areas. The North Texas room is normally where we have early Texas history and the Texas Revolution. And so for the Battle of San Jacinto, we have some really interesting artifacts. We have a letter, one of 3 written by Sam Houston after the battle, which is the first documented use of the phrase, remember the Alamo, remember Goliad. And Sam Houston was a very astute politician. He wrote 3 letters to New Orleans, to Chicago, and to New York. Why those cities? Those were the largest newspapers in North America. If you wanted to get the word out, I always tell the students, this is before the internet. There's no TikTok or Facebook or Instagram. You got to go to the newspapers if you want to get the word out. We also have a rifle that was used in the battle and items captured from Santa Anna's headquarters, including a flag that flew at the headquarters, some items from his desk, an inkwell, and his spurs, one set of spurs. Santa Anna did not travel lightly. This was a man that had serving staff and cook and a butler. And there was lots of stuff that belonged to Santa. Again, Sam Houston being an astute politician, he took a lot of those items and doled them out as gifts to friends and potential political supporters and had them engraved. So there are at least 2 sets of spurs that I know of, but we have 1. So we do have materials on display regularly that do relate to the Battle of San Jacinto as well. Absolutely. Great question. Hope I answered it.
See, we told you 20, but we knew it'd take you 30 or 40. This was a great topic. Yeah, Patty, come on.
One line, it's just really about.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I was a little bit late getting here, but I think I heard most of it. But like, some of us who grew up in Texas, of course, you always learn Texas history. But I have never seen it presented quite that clearly. You know, the big picture.
How grand the compound was.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Chapel was. Anyway, thank you.
Yeah, because we see such a, saying obvious, a small portion in San Antonio. And this was very interesting. It really makes me want to go to the Hall of State and see that exhibit.
Well, I hope you will. Like most museums, we close on Mondays, but we're open from 10 to 5, from Tuesday through Saturday, and from 1 to 5 on Sundays, and we are free. We don't charge admission. It's a great place to come visit. You can also look around some of the architecture and art in Fair Park, have lunch over at Dallas. So we hope that you will come out and visit us. I hope to see you there.
I know.
Yeah, let's give a round of applause.
David, is there more to the story?
Oh, there's a lot more to the story.
Terry, as we approach March 6th, is there some anniversary coming up in 2026? What if we reschedule you for the next chapter?
There's a lot of other topics, don't you, David?
And also, I can speak on other topics. I have a presentation about the history of the Historical Society and the life of our founder, George Bannerman Dealey. Another topic is the political cartoons of John Knott, who was a longtime political cartoonist for the Dallas Morning News. That one has a lot of great images. So I'm happy to talk on whatever subject you would like me to speak on that I feel competent to discuss. So absolutely.
So Rick, you wanted to come talk about the Alamo War.
No, whatever, David. I mean, you know, shoot,
It
yeah.
all sounds interesting.
You bring history alive, and I think we've got some history buffs here.
As a history educator, that is the highest compliment you can pay. So thank you so much. And that's what we try to do. It's so critical that we preserve and remember our history and present it to future generations. I think it's a terrible thing when we lose sight of our history, the good and the bad, the glorious, honorable decisions and the ones that were mistakes. But how do we move forward as a country if we don't remember that history and learn from it? So that's my goal, is to help educate Texans, all ages, from the little ones to the retired ones, and keep that history alive in our hearts and our minds.
Outstanding. Again, thank you. Thank you, David. Now, Rotarians at that event yesterday, as President Laura said, we had quite a few people come by. Patty, you were acknowledged and thanked for being there last evening. I had one gentleman come by. It was from Congo, he's a doctor. And he said, "What is Rotary in one word?" That's what that's how he opened our conversation. So what do you think the one word I said was? Exactly. So with that, Val, would you lead us in the four-way test of things we think, say, and do?
Please join me in the four-way test of the things we think, say, or do. First,
Is it the time?
second,
Is it there's all served?
third,
Will
Build goodwill for better futures.
and fourth.
it be
Thank y'all for being here. Next week, we have the police chief and officer of the quarter and
Bush light.